Our pal Joe Gale is with us, Montgomery County Commissioner, the Republican and sane voice in Montgomery County, back with us, and we heard some developing news yesterday about votes that still haven't been counted and are in question in Montgomery County, just one of the many counties, in tumult across the Commonwealth. Joe, thanks for your time this morning. Hi.
Hey, Chris, I always appreciate the opportunity.
So can you give us your perspective on what's going on the ground in Montgomery County?
So, obviously, we've had unprecedented numbers of mail-in ballots that came into Montgomery County, came in across the whole state of Pennsylvania. Part of it was due to the China virus, but also part of it was due to the legislation that changed in Pennsylvania that allowed this massive volume of mail-in voting to take place despite the virus. And I heard you earlier in the program talking about how the state legislature in Pennsylvania voted for mail-in voting legislation last year.
Unbelievable.
In the fall of 2019, Harrisburg passed Act 77, which was the mail-in ballot legislation that allowed 50 days of no-excuse mail-in voting. And the listeners have to remember, the Republicans hold the majority in state government.
Yep.
We don't have a Republican governor, but in the state House and the state Senate, there's a Republican majority. And every single Republican state senator unanimously voted for Act 77 last year prior to the virus. They created this entire mess that we're facing right now.
Yes.
So here in Montgomery County this year in 2020, we received about 244,000 mail-in ballots. In 2016, the last presidential cycle, the entire state of Pennsylvania received 266,000. So it's almost the same amount as the statewide, but back when we had absentee ballots. So I'm very proud of President Trump for scrutinizing these results. We need integrity in this election process. We have to audit this election, and we need massive election reform, sweeping election reform. And unfortunately, I don't have faith in the Republicans in Harrisburg to deliver that. Back when we had Corbett, the last Republican governor, they failed to uphold voter ID law. So the number one way to reform elections and make it secure and restore integrity is implementing mandatory voter ID. Back when the Republicans held the chamber's majority in Harrisburg, we had a Republican majority. The Democrat state Supreme Court shot down the voter ID law. They said that was unconstitutional, according to the state Supreme Court. However, they should have appealed that to the U.S. Supreme Court. For example, the state of Florida has mandatory voter ID. Pennsylvania doesn't. So until we have election reform with voter ID, eliminating the mail-in voting, which would also include eliminating satellite offices, drop boxes for the election, we restore the traditional absentee ballots where you need an excuse. It requires an excuse to apply for an absentee ballot. We also need to verify signatures, so we need mandatory signature verification. And the absentee ballot should be returned prior to Election Day. So your listeners are well aware of what happened in Pennsylvania, where, again, the Democrat state Supreme Court ruled that ballots could arrive 3 days after the election. And it's just been total chaos. So I'm proud that President Trump is putting a giant spotlight on this. So we identify all these irregularities, all these instances of fraud, and we can't stand for it. And we have to hold our Republicans in Harrisburg accountable, because at the end of the day, it's the state legislature that creates the election code.
Yes.
We have it here in Pennsylvania with Republicans, and they caused this entire mess with Act 77.
It's mind-boggling, and I have to confess I didn't understand it was going on at the time, and I didn't learn until this week, and shame on me, I'll own it, that I wasn't engaged enough a citizen to know better, and a talk show host. I mean, I feel like I kind of failed here myself, although we were just starting a show, so I was a little in transition, but I don't know how much you knew about it. This was a bill that was introduced by Democrats, I learned this week. Democrats were the ones that introduced this, and the Republicans adopted it.
By Democrats, it was signed by Governor Wolf, but then there was bargaining, and the hook that got remember, every single Republican state senator that voted for it, the reasoning, the hook that got them to vote for it, was they removed straight ticket off the general election ballot.
Yeah.
So for the first time this year in Pennsylvania, Our ballots no longer said straight Democrat or straight Republican. The rhinos and corrupt Republicans in Harrisburg like that because they know removing the straight ticket selfishly helps the down ballot. So it keeps their state House seats safe. It keeps their state Senate seats safe. But meanwhile, it opens up a statewide election to many problems. And we see how many ballots that only had Joe Biden filled in.
What do you know,
in the
Joe?
past, I believe would have said straight Democrat.
Right. What do you know in Montgomery County specifically? Do you have reason to believe there was fraud in Montgomery County, and to what extent, if so?
Well, we have the Dominion voting machines. So you hear all over the news nationally about Dominion voting machines. Montgomery County has Dominion. We had them back through the 1990s, and a new system was bought a couple years ago for the the paper ballots, also Dominion. I know last year when I was up for re-election in my primary of 2019, about, I believe it was 6 weeks after the primary, it was multiple weeks after the primary, I was told that there is a programming error in Hatboro. So Montgomery County has 62 municipalities, and they said one of the 62 had a programming error. It was Hatboro. So they did a hand recount, and it changed my race, the Montgomery County Commissioner race, by a couple hundred votes. So in that particular area, I might have had a couple hundred vote lead in the primary. And then after the recount, I went down a couple hundred votes. So I don't have total faith in paper ballots. I don't have total faith in Dominion voting machines. You see this occurring in various places across the country, and many counties and states have Dominion. So there has to be a deep review of the programming and the software that was used in not only Montgomery County, but everywhere. So I've personally experienced it as recently as last year. And considering it's an issue and there's litigation ongoing, we should check out the programming that went on with our machines.
Joe, what is
yesterday we had it?
Sorry to interrupt you. When people, Joe Gale is with us, by the way, Commissioner in Montgomery County. When someone casts their vote, I kind of just marvel in general that in 2020, for many of us, we still kind of wonder. I know it's not the case for everybody. It kind of depends on how you vote. I get a little stub or a receipt that I have a ballot that I guess maybe I can go scan or look up. But so many people literally that cast a vote with good faith thinking that it counts, and they don't know. They'll never know. I mean, if you were King Joe Gale and you could make voting uniform and fair, what's the answer here? I mean, it seems like we should be able to achieve it in 2020, no?
Yeah, we can send people and land them on the moon. We should be able to get Election Day correct. And the way to do it is voter ID and vote in person. I encourage, and I have been over the course of the year, because I was railing against how the Republicans voted for Act 77, the mail-in voting. Vote in person. The less people between your ballot and when it's cast, the better. Whether it's a U.S. Postal Service, whether it's a clerk in the Board of Elections, whatever it is, when you don't have that personal responsibility to cast your ballot, that's where the integrity slips away. So voter ID, to make sure it's one person, one vote, and one day. See, the Democrats' ultimate agenda is to do away with Election Day.
Yep.
Right now in Pennsylvania, you can vote 50 days out. We need Election Day, a traditional Election Day where people exercise their civic duty, vote in person. If they can't vote in person, then they request an absentee ballot. They have to identify why they need it. The excuses must be required. And then they have to verify the signature. They're not verifying signatures in Pennsylvania. So the way to cure it is to vote in person and implement voter ID. And also, bottom line, hold the Republicans in Harrisburg accountable.
Yes.
So in my opinion, any state senator, any Republican state senator in Pennsylvania is automatically disqualified for running for any higher office or any other elected office. This was a disgrace what the Republicans did in Pennsylvania. They caused this mess. And like you said, it was a bipartisan act of sabotage that led us into this 2020 disaster.
I wonder, do you think they have the stuff? I think I know the answer to this. Do they have the stuff they do? I mean, I've heard guys like Levin, people far smarter than me. We had Daniel Horowitz on yesterday. They hold the cards still. The Republican legislature still could be the 800-pound gorilla here if they want to be. You think they're made of the stuff to do it?
Technically, they could be. However, I don't have faith in them because time and time again, there's a history where they let us down. So I read articles yesterday that the state Senate would like to hold hearings and the state House would like to hold hearings and regarding the election. But let's be honest, it'll turn into a kangaroo court where it will all sound good, but the outcome will be nothing. And they know that there's a lot of emotions behind this election. And they placate. They think we're stupid.
Yeah.
So they slipped this through last fall before the virus with Act 77. Now we see what we got out of it. It's our job. It's the job of myself, the listeners, to hold them accountable. So I don't have faith in the state legislature being that 800-pound gorilla that redirects all this. We just have to hold them accountable and make sure none of them run for another office.
Joe Gale, what should people, I guess those in Montgomery County that still have questions, either about their ballot or just kind of want to know more about the count or whatever, what would you advise? I guess this is obviously more a Harrisburg issue than it is a county commissioner issue for you.
Yeah, so this week the county sent the unofficial county election results to the Department of State. Now, I'm a member of the Montgomery County Election Board, being a commissioner. I refuse to sign it because I'm not comfortable, like I said earlier, with the ongoing litigation, the questions with the Dominion voting machines, and all these other irregularities to sign the unofficial results. So I'm the minority commissioner here. I'm doing everything I can to keep an eye on things. We had a hearing yesterday for provisional ballots. Many of the challenges were dismissed, and the votes were counted. Now, the Republican Party had attorneys and the Democrat Party had attorneys. And that's the first time we ever had a hearing for provisional ballots. But it all comes back to the massive amount of mail-in votes. We had just as many in Montgomery County this year as the entire state did 4 years ago. So
amazing.
When you have that high volume, the problems come.
That's stunning.
2.6 million people this year voted by mail in Pennsylvania, 9 times as many as 2016.
And some people would say on the left, well, that's a triumph for our republic. That's more people engaged in the system. Joe, what's wrong with that, is what they'd say.
Yeah, well, I'm all for everybody getting involved in the civic process, but we have to make sure there's integrity and not cheating.
Yes.
And there's been a series of history of massive cheating in Philadelphia. People don't like the key word is where's the massive evidence or evidence of massive voter fraud. There has been in Philadelphia for decades, dating back when Frank Rizzo was running for mayor. There was voter fraud. Everybody knows it. But the fact that they have these mail-in ballots, it makes it easier to cheat, and it's harder to identify it.
Yes.
And especially when you don't verify signatures and there's no voter ID. So I'm like I said, very proud of the president for standing firm on this, and he should fight it till the very end, because if anything, and I don't think it's over. I really, truly don't believe this is over. We have Georgia, we have Arizona, Michigan that they're looking at. It's putting a spotlight on these irregularities with voting. And like you said, you weren't aware of Act 77 and how the Republicans created this mess. Now we do. And I'm traveling the whole state of Pennsylvania informing conservatives of what the Republicans did and how they dodged this election in 2020. And the Republicans around Pennsylvania are absolutely outraged because they didn't know that the Republican-held majority created it.
I'm shocked. I literally had no idea. I'm embarrassed that I knew so little about what they were doing. And they tell themselves that, well, we made all these provisions and we changed this and we changed that. And actually, if you look at the final vote on that, Joe, a number of Democrats rejected it because of what Republicans did to it, which is so funny.
Many Democrats ended up voting against it. They opposed it.
Isn't that amazing?
Republicans unanimously supported it.
I mean, it's just amazing. Democrats rejected something Republicans ended up passing unanimously. It's stunning.
It's inexcusable, totally inexcusable, and they squirm when they're asked about it, these Republican state senators, because they know they can't justify it. And we have to hold them accountable. And you know my long history of battling the GOP swamp establishment.
I do.
We have to take this on a statewide level because I'm one of the few that actually has the backbone and the courage to call out the rhino Republicans and the corrupt Republicans when they do things like this. They caused it.
You do. You're right. You are 100% right in this, Joe Gale, and I thank you so much for your time this morning. Have a great weekend, sir.
You as well, Chris. Thank you very much.
That's Joe Gale, Montgomery County Commissioner. He's a thorn in the party's side, Joe Gale. He just is. He knows it. He relishes it. But it's times like this, how can you argue with Joe Gale? How can you not look at this and not see that we're all brought to our knees in Pennsylvania and nationally because Republicans in Harrisburg decided, well, you know what? Let's give this mail-in ballot thing a whirl. Why not? And the Democrats actually rejected a great deal of it. And that's what's amazing. Uniform agreement with the Republicans to vote yes, mail-in ballots. Many, if not most, Democrats in the Senate said no thanks. Oh, folks, this is Philadelphia's AM 990 The Answer. But yeah, the Democrats, look, that's the irony. The Democrats are the ones that said no to they ultimately hated what, this is so funny. How do I say this? Democrats introduced this. Republicans got a hold of it and said, well, this sounds like a good idea. We've just got to make some fixes to make it more Republican-y for our comfort level. And then the Democrats said, no, we don't like it. We're not going to support it. And the Republicans said, too bad. We're doing it. It's almost like the Brer Rabbit thing. Don't throw me into the briar patch. Whatever you do, don't throw me into the briar patch. Idiots. Idiots. These dopey Pennsylvania Republicans. Snatching defeat from victory. Democrats propose it. Republicans say, I don't like this. We're going to change it so we like it. And the Democrats say, no, don't you pass it. We don't like that. Don't you dare pass it. Oh, yeah, we will. It's like a classic Bugs Bunny cartoon where they're passing the dynamite back and forth. And then the guy that, is trying to blow up the rabbit, he ends up tricking him to holding the dynamite stick. Oh, folks, my threshold of tolerance for the Pennsylvania GOP, I'm done. I'm done. Pennsylvania Republicans in that legislature are the most worthless, feckless bunch of people I've ever watched in my life. Ever. It would be easier to live in a Democrat state like New Jersey, so at least you know what's coming. This bunch, I can't even explain them. And they all write their editorials. This is an outrage. We're going to have a stern talking to. Yeah, all right. Thanks for the little sock puppet show you're putting on after the fact.